All right. What's going on, everybody? My name is Ian Robinson, the Master ZBrush trainer and also training manager here at Maxon, where we make learning 3D everything as fun as possible. And of course, too, we're sitting here doing a lot of 3D printing this week. Real quick, if you were at GDC and you came by and you said hi, thank you so much for hanging out with me. It was super awesome. We have a lot to cover today, so let's go ahead and get into some of the fun stuff. First things first, let's go ahead and, oops, too quick on the figures. So here we are, of course, Max on One. So we have a lot of the tools for you. Anything you're looking for to get into 3D, whether it be motion graphics, sculpting, rendering, VFX, etc. You're into it. This is what we're here to help provide the right tools for creatives to be creative. That sounds kind of cool, right? So, and of course, too, our events. Our events are always a big one. We pride ourselves on having training sessions and shows like this that showcase all the cool stuff. For the last few weeks, we've covered 3D printing with our tools. And as you can see, we have, that's what we're covering today. But we also have some special shows, like we have ZBrush and Pitch Dev Studios, and behind the scenes look at some of the really cool events. And then, of course, we have Ask the Trainer coming up, and so forth. So there's always something going on, and for the community to be engaged with. And definitely, if you're new to some of this stuff, or you want to check out what some of these tools that you may not be familiar are, these shows are a great way to be introduced to that. And then, of course, if you want to get into these tools, you're brand new to either one of our softwares or to 3D in general, then we have an entire Getting Started series on this. So we have our Cinema 4D, our Redshift, Universe, and ZBrush. And all you need to do is basically go ahead and come into Cineversity, just log in with a complete free account. These are free for you because we want you in these tools as soon as possible. They're really nice, short videos. Anna Carolina, if you're here, hello. She helped out with this series, and she really put together an amazing series, a 27-part, but it's like an hour and a half worth of total content. And this will get you into ZBrush very quickly. And then, of course, shirts. Everybody wants a free shirt. So having shirts here is super awesome. And of course, too, we just want to say thank you. That's really what we want to do. We want to say thank you to coming in and hanging out with us, and also just, you know, being a part of the community. It's really amazing. So don't forget the code on there. I believe it's as I always butcher this one. I'm so sorry, Kyle, in the background. But ZBrush Print Prep is where it is. It'll flash on the screen, or it'll be put there in the actual comment section. And then, of course, there is one link to rule them all for all of this access. So if you're curious on any of that stuff, please come in and just go ahead and click those links. You can also ask your question, like, Ian, how do I do blah? You can come in here and you can say, you know what, I have a ZBrush question, and you could say, why is it awesome for sculpting? And that's a great question. And I'll sit there and I'll explain for about an hour on how to do that. It was nothing more. You just hit submit and boom, you'll say, boom, there it is. So you'll get an hour and a half response of me talking for something as simple as that. But yes, the passcode is ZBrush Print Prep. So all caps on that. Very cool. Now, what's really, really fun, I'm going to go ahead and drop down my screen here in a second, is I have a special guest. So we've been leading up to this, and I want to bring on a special guest. And if you have no idea who he is, we're going to go ahead and welcome on Tama from Lychee Slicer. Tama, come on, man.
Hey, hello, Ian.
Thank you so much, Tama, for being here. Please introduce who you are, what you do, and why you're so amazing at it.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. Well, I'm working at Lychee Slicer, which is a slicing software for 3D printers. I'm working in, of course, in the development of the software and multiple things in the company. For the little bit of background about me, in fact, I worked 12 years at Pixologic before the acquisition by Maxon. Then I know, of course, very well ZBrush. I'm sculpting myself when I have some free time. I have some of my stuff behind me. And of course, I'm doing a lot of 3D printing. And obviously, I'm a big fan of 3D printing because yes, I sculpt, I print, I prepare, I do everything myself. And I'm lucky to have, of course, the software which is working the way I want. Then I'm very, very lucky. And at the same time, I love also sharing a lot of things about 3D printing. I'm running in French, sorry for that, a YouTube channel with a lot of things about 3D printing. And the more people discover 3D printing, the better I feel, because this is a fantastic tool, especially for you who are watching this stream, who are creative people, having your own 3D creation, not on screen, but in your hands, for me, this is really priceless. Then I do a lot of things around 3D printing.
Yeah, no, that's super awesome. And we're really excited. We have our first question for you, Thomas, but the question is the slicer free?
Yes and no. We are, in fact, working on this freemium business model. We have a free version of Lychee Slicer, which has some restriction. Let's say the advanced features are more for pro user, which is a paid version. But with the free version, you can do a lot of things. We have hundreds of thousands of users using the free version of Lychee Slicer without any problem. Then if you are beginners, you can start with the free version, and the more you progress, then you can switch to the pro version.
Awesome. Awesome. That's very cool. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pull up my screen and we're going to just do a quick recap of what it is we've been doing here the last few weeks. And then we're going to showcase how to export something in ZBrush to get it ready for Lychee Slicer. And then we're going to go ahead and send it on over to Thomas with the making of movie magic. And so therefore we can showcase, he can then showcase some really cool tips and tricks on how to start preparing everything. So real fast, this is the model that we've been working on. And of course, too, it's the Leonardo fan art piece for the Ninja Turtles, one of my favorite. Kind of modeled it after the 90s version of it. And what's cool, let's go ahead and just pull that up because I have it here. Boom. And so, yes, there's everything. So here, this is still a work in progress for me. But again, this is the whole point of this show, is to kind of really just showcase how you can go through and start prepping this. As it stands right now, I've gone ahead and broke this up into several different pieces, which we had covered exactly how to create a key cut in a test cube and the importance for figuring out what your printer's capable of, the tolerances and stuff like that. That was in episode 1, which we'll be sharing a lot of those links down there. All the VODs are recorded on the Maxon training team. So you'll be able to go there and see these past events. So that's just YouTube, Maxon training team. So here, we showcase this, and then we moved into actually merging files together and then cutting against itself so that you can go ahead and see how, this model actually fits. We also talked about intersections and the importance of hiding your seam lines, because again, it can't always be avoided. There are some times where you're going to see a cut in the model. It depends on what you're going for and what the structure of the model was originally. But when you can obviously hide something like we did here with the wrappings on his arm, we showcased how to go ahead and cut into that, and then how to get those keys together, and then just the ways that I recommend, cutting against itself and creating the final steps. So that's a lot of information that we covered. And then we had a special guest last week, Scott Unruh, who came in and even dove further in the sculpting side of it and all of that. So it was really awesome to hear you guys welcome him on. So thank you guys so much. So now, of course, we have our model here and we're all done, because everything I just showcased over the last couple of weeks is exactly the approach I took for this model. So every technique on how to put the key, where to figure it out, where to merge, all of that was showcased. Now we have our model, and the important part is, well, how do we get this model out of ZBrush and into a slicer like Lychee Slicer? So first and foremost, what you want to do is we want to spend time making sure that we have a model that's not super heavy. A lot of times, if you have something that's over a million active points, what could happen is, the system itself could start slowing down. Now, slicers have been, taking their time to really try to optimize their performance, of course, but you don't want to be throwing in, 5, 6, 7 million poly version of a hand into a slicer. It's just not going to do it, perform well. So if ZBrush can handle 97 million. Yeah, Thomas, can you speak on that for a second?
Yeah, exactly. If I can jump on that. In fact, it's difficult to find the good balance, because a few years ago, the resolution of resin printer, especially because when let's say, we want to print this type of character, resin printing is better than filament printing. Then for resin printing, before, the pixel size was roughly 50 microns. Now, the most accurate printer, it's 18 micron. Remember that just a hair is between 70 to 110 micron. Then it's very, very small. Then if you have not enough polygon because you apply a decimation which is too aggressive, I would say, then you may see the raw, let's say the raw polygons for your print. But if you have too many polygons anyway, it will be your model will be more accurate than the printer itself. Then that's why it's important to have a good decimation, having enough polygons to be sure that it retains all the tiny details if your printer is able to print at this quality. Otherwise, yes, it's too many information. It's a lot of data to process, because a slicing process at the end, when you export to your printer, it's like doing a rendering. Then the more data you have, especially if you don't have a high-end computer, the slower it will be. And I will just conclude on that, is that when you are a creator with ZBrush, and let's say luckily ZBrush is very, very good and very, very powerful on low spec computer, because this is only CPU based, at least for everything about the sculpting. A lot of, let's say, users who download model online or buy 3D models to print have very low spec computers. Then if you import on this computer models which are 50 millions of polygons, of course, it will be very challenging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's all great information. Thank you so much. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and let's get into first things first, as I got my nice little wheel. There we go. Perfect. We're going to go ahead and talk about exporting and the different ways that you can do that. I'll recover scaling just a little bit. I did cover it a bit in week 2, but I'll go over that again, because that's a common question that we get all the time. How do I scale? How do I make sure it's something? I did mention that when you're key cutting, it is best to do it when you're in a set scale, because then you'll get accurate measurements of the distance between the different cuts. However, if for some reason like this, you went ahead and you saved out your model, you saved out your ZPR or your ZTL, you open it back up, and the first thing you notice is that if we come over here to Z plugin and we were to say set scale master, oh look, everything's set to 1 again. And so what happened? Well, anytime that you set scene scale and you're working with that, and then you close down the program and you open it back up, the sliders just reset, but ZBrush remembers that this was set at a scene scale. And so this was why the importance of having a bounding box was really good. So for example, let's say you don't have a bounding box. How did I get this? Well, what we need to do is we need to go over to Z plugin, scale master, and just say new bounding box subtool. And this will come through and actually bound your model in this box. That's I did that on purpose. That was not good. I'll take my dad joke aside. But you can see here, there it is, that the model is right in there, and then it's good to go. And then we can say set scene scale on this bounding box. And of course, here we had set it to about 350 millimeters in total height. So if I would just go ahead and click that, it remembers that number, which is really good for you. Of course, you can set in centimeters or you can set in inches. And there's something I actually want to call it a little trick if you're new to the metric system. Is we had mentioned 25.4 millimeters is equal to 1 inch in the imperial system. But another fun little trick is if you wanted to convert millimeters into centimeters, you just take the decimal and you move it over to the left one. So you can see 350 millimeters is equivalent to 35 centimeters. So a little trick, it's just a decimal movement, no calculator needed. You're good to go. But we're going to work in millimeters because that's what I prefer to work into. That's what most 3D printing users will also use as well. It's just a more universal measurement system. So now that we have that and we're all ready to go, right? So let's go through and check decimation real fast. So I'm going to hit solo. And this is what I like to do, my little step down method. Let's actually take this head real quick for demonstration purposes. And let's set him back to DynaMesh. And I'm going to do this relatively high. So I'm going to first find the resolution. I'm going to hit DynaMesh on this. And I spoke about the reasons why I use DynaMesh, which is designed to actually delete the internal mesh, close all holes, and make it as watertight as possible. Of course, let's say we have a really dense model. So I'm just going to do this real fast and make it dense. So this is about just less than 1 million. We would want to actually drop this down a bit. So the way that I recommend doing it is coming up to Z plugin again. We'll dock that on the left-hand side. and we're going to go to Decimation Master. And unless your printer, unless you're sending something to, let's say, like Mamaki, which shout out to them just for a minute because they do color printing. For the most part, you're not really going to be keeping polypaint unless you absolutely want to. And you can do that by coming up and saying use and keep polypaint if you wanted to showcase your model in that color in the software. But unless you're going to need the color information on the OBJ, really, we're just going to focus down here to keep things simple, which is our presets. And the way to drop this down to keep the detail as much as possible, but also to get it as low as possible, I like to do the step down method. So it's decimated now, just about 1 million. I will first start with the custom slider points. And I usually start this, if it's around 1 million, I usually start somewhere around 500 to 650. Just a nice low number. Let me actually come here with my magnifying glass and blow that up a bit. So I like to start off just a little bit shy than that because the decimation is going to be coming through and essentially triangulating everything and just trying to preserve the details best where it can be. This is also a good time. This is also a good time. Words to call out the fact that if there are areas in which I want to preserve detail, I can actually use the mask for that. So let me show what that looks like. So here, let's say I want to preserve some of the wrinkles in the eye. I can actually come through and kind of do a nice little masking. And I can soften this a bit by control clicking, or I can actually go to masking, come down here, and there is blur. So you can just click blur mask a bunch of times, or like I said, you can just go ahead and just control tap a bunch, gets it nice and soft. So let's say I wanted to preserve this area, and then I'm going to go ahead and say custom. So here's the mesh beforehand. And let's go ahead and just put this over here so you can see a nice before and after. I'm going to control S to stamp it. And now I'm going to go ahead and say custom. And we're going to let that calculate for a second. When you use a mask, again, it's going to try to preserve that area. You don't want to mask everything because then you're basically saying everything is important. What you really want to do is just where there's a lot of detail, you want to make sure that you mask that off. Now, of course, this is quite dense right now. You can see here, not a whole lot changed, but we did drop from about 1 million to 650,000 active points. But the reason why I recommend this is because the first time you hit custom or you hit pre-process, it takes a while for ZBrush to assess the model and then to figure out the best way to come in and preserve as much of it as it can. But once that pre-process is done, the next time you click, let's say 250, you're going to see here, boom, it's so much faster. It's going to come in, it already pre-calculated. So now it knows where to put those actual points. And so I can drop this down as low as I want, but I do want to make sure that I'm checking my model. So here, if I control Z, this is the 650, and then step forward, you can see here that there was not a lot of change between the two. So I do always try to go as low as I can. I'll try to push it. So I'll say like 150. And okay, I started losing some detail in this area. That's a little, I don't need to go extreme with it. So, as long as you're around, I'd say 100,000 to, 650 to 750,000, that's a good number that I've found that works well in Lychee Slicer. Tama, do you have any recommendations for this?
Yeah, multiple of them. First of all, about the technique you just explained about using the masking and decimation master, you used, if I'm not wrong, the masking at 100% for the RGB intensity, but you can use a value which is lower, let's say 50% for your masking. Like that, because at 100%, it will just preserve all the polygons. At 50%, it will keep, let's say, roughly 50% of the decimation more than everything else. That's why you may have a big variation. And most of the time using, let's say, 50 to 70% for the RGB intensity for the masking will be enough to remove, let's say, really unnecessary polygons for the area that you are masking while keeping all the main details. This is the first thing. And the second thing, it's very difficult to know, okay, is it enough decimation or not enough decimation? Then a small trick for me I'm using that I'm just changing the point of view in ZBrush, meaning that if my model, let's say, is 200 millimeter tall, then my head perhaps will be, I don't know, 25 millimeters. Then I'm just zoom out zooming out, just to have the size of my model to be roughly the same size of my print of my screen. And sometimes I'm using myself a ruler that I put on my screen, my tablet, just to have the good size. And then I'm playing the decimation to see roughly, okay, if it's still enough details, okay, I can decimate even more. And when I start to see the loss of details with my decimation, okay, it's too far, then I increase a little bit more. Then I'm trying to work also at scale. In fact, when I'm working in ZBrush, and this is what you just presented a few minutes ago, and also during the first stream, I'm always working at scale like that. It helps me, of course, about the size of parts, the thickness, and all these type of things, but also for the decimation. Then yes, this is extra things. Because just for a small head, I don't know what is the scale exactly of your model, but if your head is, let's say, 10 millimeter tall, or you're doing miniatures for board games, something like that, it won't be visible if you keep too many details. Then yes, finding the good balance also depends not only on numbers, but what your eyes are seeing on screen, and of course, what they will see when you will have your final print in your hands. If it makes sense.
Absolutely. No, it makes that makes total sense. And absolutely. Also, too, I do want to call out to the chat. If you guys do have any questions, we know that we are dumping a ton of information. And like I said, these will be recorded so you can go back and rewatch it. But if you guys have questions while we're presenting, please let us know, because it's super important too that, you know, we try to answer your question while you're here, so then you can go home with that information, and that way you don't have to guess or search forever on it. So, okay, great. Thank you so much for that extra bit. Now let's go ahead real quick. So we've decimated our model. Now we need to export. And the export process has actually been a really straightforward process, but there has been a little bit of confusion that I've seen in some of the tutorials I've given, where people have asked the difference between the 3D Print Hub and, of course, the Scale Master and the ways to export. And it's important to know that these two plugins don't directly talk to each other, because they're different processes within ZBrush, but there's just a couple like specific steps you want to take in order to make sure that it exports out correctly. And actually, we had a question come up right now, which I think I'll be able to answer. Why, when I'm exporting for 3D printing using Scale Master, the scale is wrong on the ZTLs, or if I export an OBJ, the scale is correct, but when I open the file in Lychee Slicer. So yeah, I think we're going to get into that question, which is important. So let me go ahead and cover that, and then we'll take another question. So exporting out in ZBrush, the steps that you would like to take, we've already established scale with our bounding box. So if I were to click this, and again, we come over here and we hit set scene scale, we already established the scale at 350 millimeter. Now, what we want to do is, I usually don't export out the bounding box. I just use that bounding box to establish scale and to hold scale for me. What I do then is I pick just any one of my subtools. It doesn't matter which one, you just pick one of them, because I want to export everything. And so what I will do is then I will actually go up to 3D Print Hub. And this is the important step. This is actually where the scale can be a little bit different if you kind of ignore this part. So this is the looky here moment that Paul Gabriel would be like. So shout out to Paul Gabriel. Looky here, let's go. Right. So this would be his moment. The super important. This is a eyes up here, please. So when you pick your model, you say update your size ratio, and you're going to see a almost near identical pop-up that says, well, what is the scale? And here we have the millimeter that is pre-selected, 51 by 50 by 46 point blah, blah, blah. We're going to click this one. The thing is once you've set the scale, you don't want to change subtools to then export, because when you do, what you've told 3D Print Hub is this is the size of this model. If I were to come over here and pick the body and then say export, you see my numbers didn't change. My numbers stayed the same, 51 by 50 by 46. And this is really, really important. By changing this body or changing the subtool after identifying these numbers, this is what ZBrush is going to use to calculate the size on export. And this is where a lot of errors come up, and they say, oh, hey, this is wrong. This is too big. This is too small. Why did it come in microscopic? Why is it like 15 times larger than my printer that I have? I don't have a crazy big machine. What happened? And it's literally because it's just those numbers were preset, and then we switch subtools. And this can happen so easily because you could be going to export, you set it, and then you looked over at modern, like, oh my goodness, I want to change this one thing. And so, oh, you know what? This his sheets on the back are just a little. I can add a quick line here, right? So I'll pick my thing, and then I'll say like, boom, I add my line, and then I'm like, okay, good to go. Let me just export. It's that simple. And so we want to remember, again, super important. You pick the subtool you want, doesn't matter which one. You come up to update size ratio, and you click the measurement of choice, and then you walk away. You just walk away from that. And then what you can do is you can go down here at the bottom to export options. And we have a few different options. We have everything, which is all, what's visible, or what's selected. And so I like to choose visible because sometimes I will have like other things. You know, of course, we have the ZBrush naming convention up here at the top. Maybe I have that little sphere that was at the top of my subtool list that's buried somewhere in the chest. And all of a sudden, you know, I export that out, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to just say what's visible to this, and I usually hide that. And then, of course, I go to export STL. Now, notice I'd said I'd update my size ratio, and I didn't change my subtool. I now say export to STL. You can also export to OBJ, 3MF, etc. I choose STL. It's just what I like. I do OBJ sometimes too. And then I'll pick my folder. I'll call this something like my Leo 3D print STLs, right? STLs. Boom. Let's watch Ian add in all the wrong characters and things. And then I'll put a folder like that, and then I'll go ahead and say save. Now, I did go through originally and name all of my subtools, and we talked about that in week 2, where if you break something apart, you merge it together, you cut it with live boolean. When it's done, I usually will call that Leo body _ final. And then I'll say save. And then now we get some options. And the first one, of course, is choice 1, which is, do you want to save the subtool as, you know, the name _ subtool1.stl, or you can go with choice 2, which is you use the subtool name as is. If you're like me and you're naming your subtools, I choose choice 2. Or you can have choice 3, which will ask you for every one it's exporting out, what do you want to name it? That's like a nice little fail safe. If you didn't name it and you're like, ooh, I should name these, you can actually hit choice 3, and then you can start naming all that for you. But I'll pick choice 2, and then now it's just going to go ahead and do its magic. And then we get a nice little pop-up that says your files were successfully exported. And that means that we get to pass the torch through the magic of internet to Tama to showcase, oh, how are we going to get these into Lychee Slicer? So real fast, before we do that, let's go ahead and pick another question real quick, which is from Rich3D. What do you find is the best shape for a key? Also, how do you decide the gap between the male and the female parts? I find I have to sand down my keys more often than not. Thanks. So great question. We actually covered all of that in week 1 and week 2. But what I will say is for any type of generic key, so non-articulated keys, I prefer the tapered method because I used to work in manufacturing. Fun fact about Ian, I'll ask you sometime around the summit, which is, you know, I used to work in manufacturing, and sharp edges are the bane of any connected piece. So if you have a sharp little edge and a nice burr, and you're trying to intersect that into something, typically what will end up happening is it will get caught up and it will stick and it won't fit correctly. And so you actually want a nice tapered angle, something like this right here, because what that's going to do is allow it to fit in nicely. So when they're tapered, it fits in easier and also removes the chance of there being any burrs or sharp edges. And you can also see too, I recommend having a soft fall off between the edges. While a nice sharp edge can look really crisp, no one's going to see that once you put the model together. So there's no need to be like perfectly sharp tack, blah, blah, blah. That's going to give you more problems than it's going to give you solutions. So definitely check out those other episodes 1 and 2. I go into depth. Like we spend an hour and a half talking about creating keys. So definitely check that out. Great question. And now we're going to pass it on up to you, Tamal.
Thank you, Jan. I would like just to say hello to Shane Olson, who joined the chat. Then,
Yeah, what's
hi,
up, Shane?
Yeah, we're happy to see you online. Okay, yeah, I'm in Lychee Slicer. Something I didn't mention, we released a week ago, version 6, then a new version, which is right now a public beta, only available on our Discord server. Then I'm running a beta right now, then everything should be fine, but if something goes wrong, then put that on the beta aspect of the application. What I just did right now is just to load the 3D model in Lychee Slicer. I will just do a kind of overview of the application very quickly, just for you to understand. I have no idea if online you already know the software or not. In few words, the slicer is the application which will do all the preparation for the 3D printer. A slicer is, let's say, it will add everything to go from digital, I would say, virtual world to the real world. The real world have some forces, just like gravity. And also because a 3D printer is, I would say, kind of dumb. If you just give a 3D model to a 3D printer, the printer has no idea about what it can do with this 3D model. Then the slicer is really here to help you prepare your model and, of course, ensure that you have a successful print. I think that Jan can confirm on that. Unfortunately, the first step to succeed for your 3D print is quite high, depending if you do resin printing, filament printing, and of course the complexity of your 3D model. And we try with Lychee Slicer to make this first step as low as possible. Then we'll try to keep that as simple as possible. And while preparing the model, I will show you two possibilities using a kind of automatic solution, just a one press of a button, and you're let's say ready to print. And of course, if you want to really master what you're doing, having the control of your 3D printing process, it will be, of course, all the key information that will be which will be help you to succeed in your printing. I'm very sorry, of course, I'm French and I'm finding my words. Last time I really talked a lot in English. What was at the last ZBrush summit? It's been a while now.
No. You're doing fantastic. You sound clear. It's perfect and very concise. So thank you so much and just thank you again for taking the time to come in and talk about this stuff.
No problem.
Yep. Yeah, please continue.
Okay. Then very quickly, the process of 3D printing a model is split in, let's say, three main actions. The first one is to organize your 3D model based on your 3D printer build plate. Then you have to, let's say, define if you want to have, let's say, to hollow your model to save some material and also let's say, reduce some forces applied to your model, adding your supports, and I will explain that, of course, later, to help your model to, let's say, to grow, to print, to appear, let's say, in the real world. And of course, at the end, you have all the process of exporting to your 3D printer. Like I said, I will focus mainly on resin 3D printing because this is more, I think, what Ian want to do. And most ZBrush models are printed in resin. Of course, filament printing is very interesting, but let's just focus on the first thing. Then the model that Jan sent me, I just did a drag and drop in the application, and you see that everything appears in my scene. And what you see here is a bounding box of the 3D printer that I selected. You have a lot of different 3D printers. You have very small one. You have huge 3D printer, then going, let's say, from the Elegoo Mars, which is very small one, to the Apex Maker X1, which is a very, very big printer. You need to consider all of that, because if your 3D model that you created in ZBrush is too big to fit in your 3D printer, it will be a problem. Then you may need to split your model in even more separate parts. You can do that, of course, in ZBrush. You can also do that in Lychee Slicer, but Lychee Slicer is when you want to split, let's say, okay, you have your base, let's say it's too big, you can split in two. Okay, this is a planar cut, nothing else. If you really want to do an advanced cut like you can do in ZBrush, do that in ZBrush, obviously. Anyway, You have this building box. You have all the 3D models. Like most software, you have, let's say, a toolbar on the left side with multiple tools to, let's say, mainly arrange your build plate with your 3D models. You can copy, orient, things like that. And on the other side, you have some parameters, values, and other, let's say, tools, but we will see that later. Something which is very important, and I'm very happy that Jan is working this way, is that Jan explained everything about the scale, which is very, very important because, like I said, we are switching from the virtual world to the real world. But he didn't mention something, that's the original position of your 3D model. If I'm going back in ZBrush, there you have the original model, and when he did the export, he export everything as is in this position. And if you go back in Lychee Slicer, you see that all my models are just together on the center of the let's say, the printer build volume. Why? Because you don't really keep in original position. You don't print everything all together. Otherwise, there is no need to cut your model in multiple parts. But it can be quite important to know how your model is organized. Why I'm explaining that is because sometimes you download a 3D model, let's say from another creator, you want to print that, and when you load, you have something like that. But you don't really know where, let's say, is the front, let's say, of an arm, what is the position, and where you will see that later, put your support. These support are these small pillars which helps your model to let's say, to grow, to print, but it will leave some spots, let's say, on my arm. If you see that on screen, you need to remove, you need to cut. Then if you can hide like the seams of your cuts in a position which won't be visible, it's even better. But when it's not your model, it's not very easy to anticipate and understand that. That's why I'm using a lot this functionality. I'm selecting everything, and in the move tool, you have original position, and it will grab the original data in your 3D model to bring back your model in the original position. After that, you can just doing a rotation like 90 degrees. You can move your model, but at least you have a kind of, okay, idea about, okay, my model will be like this, and I know where each part is. You see, I have this part, this part, this part, and all of that. This is just something to help you to convert, let's say, from ZBrush or a software that you don't really know which creates a model to Lychee Slicer and then prepare your work. Then this is just a small trick, but I really like working this way and understanding my model better before doing the preparation. Then let me just undo. And just one thing that you may have noticed, which is very, very important now, which is more the next step, is some models are in blue, which is a default selection color in Lychee Slicer, and some models are in red. And if you look on the side there, sorry, I don't have a magnifying glass in Lychee Slicer like in ZBrush, you have a button which tell you that, okay, this model have structural errors, here mainly holes. This is very, very important. Jan told that before in this stream and also previous stream, that your model must be watertight. If your model is not watertight, the printer will have some holes and won't know what to do. And this is where you have some pillars like supports, which grows because your model is not fully watertight. Then you must clean your 3D models. Sorry to say that, but DynaMesh is a great tool, but it's really optimized to build very fast your 3D model. And it takes some freedom sometimes for the topology, and then it will create some tiny holes. It's not a problem in ZBrush, but of course in Lychee Slicer or another slicer, it can be problematic. That's why it's important to repair your model, especially here, filling holes. And you see you have the feedback. 13 holes has been fixed. And now my model is good. I have multiple models which have the problem. Then you can select all of them, like this one, fixing everything, and it's done. You can do the fix in ZBrush. You can do the fix in other software, like you have 3D Builder on Windows, which does a great job. You have Netfab Basic, which is also a great tool. And you have also the fix mesh in ZBrush. I don't suggest to use the fix mesh because the fix mesh is more designed for ZBrush and not really for let's say, other software, then try to do more of this fix in, let's say, Lychee Slicer, or let's say a dedicated software. And a last thing, which is you need to be very careful. This is more a trick for you if you are a creator about fixing your mesh. If you are doing like me, I'm using a lot subdivision modeling. I love using subdivision levels in ZBrush, and I spend my time switching to DynaMesh to mix everything, then doing a retopology with ZRemesher, and then projecting my details and doing so on. And sometimes I'm using, of course, DynaMesh, and on top of that, I'm using Sculptris mod, Sculptris Pro, to do a lot of modifications. And then I'm doing a decimation. If you do all this type of operation, especially the decimation on top of Sculptris Pro, you may have a very long triangles, triangles, if not wrong for the name, which can be also very problematic. That's why doing a retopology and projecting details on the subdivision levels will always create you a very clean topology. Sorry, this is very technical. I don't know if it speaks to everyone, but the cleaner will be your topology, the less problem you will have with your 3D print, whatever is a slicer. It's not related to a Lychee Slicer. Sorry, a lot of information.
No, absolutely. And like you said, we mentioned that a little bit. This is why when I talked about it, about choosing, Sculptris or DynaMesh or any method that you're using, really at the end of the day, when you're going through, don't worry about 100%. If you're struggling to get it watertight in ZBrush, it's so amazing to just pop it into the slicer once you have it mostly done and then going through and repairing. Of course, you do want to make sure that you are always checking for major repairs. You want to, if it's a sculptural problem, go in and give it a sculptural solution. But for something like this is why I was saying don't stress on it, because there could have been like a little bit of floating topology, or there could have been a tiny hole you missed and it's just not coming out. And then this is where Lychee comes in and just allows you to do it. And of course, like you said, Jamal, there's also other applications that do that. Yeah. And it's just, it just makes it gives us a little bit more comfort, so you can relax a little bit and you don't have to stress too much on it to get your model ready for print.
No. Something which is important also to keep in mind is that if Lychee Slicer is not able to fix your model, there is a high chance that the topology is really screwed up somewhere. That's why you may need to switch to a more advanced software to clean your problem, or, like I said, just in ZBrush, just redo a DynaMesh on top of that, even if it's, okay, I prefer subdivision levels, but you can do a DynaMesh in high resolution, you decimate again, and then you export back in Lychee Slicer. You may have some small holes, but it will be easy fix. Then just keep that in mind. And so also something which is very important to know is, okay, you have your model in Lychee Slicer, and okay, you move forward, you add your support, and for some reason, you notice something which is wrong. Or like you just explained, Jan, you want to add, let's say, a scar or a mark, let's say, on the blade or just in the back or whatsoever.
Oh, hold on one second. We might have lost.
And change the scale and all of that. You can just, sorry, it's fine.
Sorry, real quick. We lost you for a second. At least I did on my side. So okay. Just because I lost you on my side, I just want to make sure. Could you repeat a little bit, like start over on that?
Yeah, if for some reason you need to update your model because you want to slightly change your design, or you need to fix something or whatsoever, you can go back in ZBrush, and if you export the same model again in the same conditions, meaning that you keep the same size, the same position, all of that, you can go back in Lychee Slicer and you can update the file, and then the file will be updated, and all the preparation you did, creating your supports, following your models, and all of that, will be updated at the same time. Then you can do this back and forth between ZBrush and Lychee Slicer and updating your model very easily. Then that's why you have the auto update, and you can even, put that auto update or manually update your files. Then keep that in mind that you have the freedom to switch between both applications.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And sorry again for, I thought I lost you on my side, so I just wanted to make sure that we didn't lose any of that information.
No, that's fine.
We did have a question come up from Mr. Shane Olson. Does Lychee fill interior cavities? I try and catch them in ZBrush, but I wonder if there's a tool there.
I will answer this question in very few seconds, Shane. We have a tool which shows the cavities, but you can manually fill these cavities, not automatic solution so far, at least for that. It was my next step. Then, sorry, first step is, okay, define the orientation of your 3D models. And after that, I speak about the hollowing and the cavities. What is very important when you define the orientation of your 3D models is to, of course, find a solution where you will avoid as much as possible first the islands. I will show that later. This is part which just start to, let's say, grow to print without being connected to the build plate from the bottom. Then you need to have a support to help this part just start to print. And also be sure that all this support which will be needed to help your model printing will be on a location which are not really visible when you will remove them, because it will put, let's say, some scars on your model. Then less visible, better it is, like the cuts. That's why I like putting my support, let's say, on the keys there, because it won't be visible. It will be just, of course, parts of the assembly. You can also sand very easily without any problem. While if you put supports, you see on the skin there, when you remove your support, you will have these small scars because of the support. You will need to sand, and then you will lose slightly the grain, let's say the texture that Jan did on the skin of the character. That's why finding a good option will be quite important. But when you have a model like that, which have, of course, let's say details and part everywhere, it's not very easy. Then I'm asking myself, okay, how I will see my model? Will I see my model, let's say, on front side like that, or more on the side because the head is looking at me on this direction, or more on the back? Then I try to put the orientation we have less supports more visible. Let me just show you the head. Where is the head? There. For a head, as an example, you will not print your head, let's say, like that, with the face going, just looking down the build plate, because this is all the support which go on this direction. And then you will have a lot of scars because of these supports really on the face. Then it will be easier and better to have the head more oriented this way. Like that, you can put a lot of support on the bottom, perhaps slightly on the back, and it should be okay. Then that's why the orientation is very, very important. And some models, like let's say the base, okay, you have the bottom, you can orient like this. What also will be important is that you need some support with that later, which will need to start from the bottom of your model. You see, just touching the build plate there. It's better to have the support on the back of the base than on the front, where it will be more visible. And because of the text, I know that the front is on top, the back is there on the bottom, and of course, my support won't be visible on the front side here. And it's really a strategy to understand what you will see on your model, what will be the best orientation to hide as much as possible the cut, which is, of course, something you do on the design part of the process, and then the small scars, the marks, I would say, the impact, I don't know to explain that better in English, of the support of on your 3D model. Let me just orient a few models, and I will explain very quickly the things about the hollowing. Then for the leg, you see, like that, I will have all the support on the bottom, no problem, because the leg, the feet, sorry, will be just on the base of the model. Then you can hide a lot of things. But something is wrong there. Something which is that you need to avoid at all costs is to have big parts like this one being very parallel to the build plates. 3D printing in resin doesn't really like when you have a part which is very parallel. You need to tilt your model to give some angles, roughly, let's say 30, 40 degrees, but not something which is very parallel. Why? Let me switch now to the prepare section, because I don't know if you see how it's working for a resin printer. It's one layer which is printed with a very, very small thickness, roughly 50 microns, 30 microns in resin. And when the first layer has been printed, this is a cured resin, then you need to unstick this first layer from the bottom of your resin tank. There is a small transparent film. And this process is like when you remove a patch, when you hurt yourself, what you put, what is the name? When you're patching yourself?
Oh, like
Help
a
me,
Band-Aid? Like a
yeah,
Band-Aid.
Band-Aid.
Yeah, Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need to remove that, but you're not removing that, let's say, progressively like a Band-Aid, but you need to
Yeah.
remove everything all together. Then it's a lot of forces which are applied to that. Then if you, let me just go back, sorry, to the horizontal position, you go in Prepare, and you have this vertical line, which name is a clipping bar. And you see, let me remove the outline. There, sorry. You see all the layers which will be printed one by one. And when you have big areas like that, which are just appearing all together, it's a big Band-Aid that you need to scratch, to remove all together. If you give some angle, like this one, then it's more progressive. It's more a little bit of pixels than resin, which will add it all together. Then this is very important to avoid as much as possible big parts which are really parallel to the build plates. If you look at the base, which was here, of course, it's too big to be printed flat on the build plate. But if I just revert my orientation, like this one, doing 90 degrees, and you go then in Prepare, you see, first layer, you have all these small parts of the bricks, and then you have a big layer altogether. And when the printer will try to, let's say, unstick, which name is peeling your layer, this is a peeling process, it will be very, very hard. That's why if you give this angle, like I said before, like this one, and now you look at this clipping bar, you see it's more progressive, and then you have less forces. This is a lot of technical data, but why it's important to have less forces applied for each layers, it's because if you have too much strength, you have a lot of deformations, and this is where your print is just detached for the support, and you have the support which print, and your model is just in the resin tank, and this is a failed print. Then less force, better it is. I'm talking a lot, and Jan, please feel free to stop me.
No, you're good. This is so much good information, and like you said, it is technical and it is a lot of information. And something I've noticed with the 3D printing community at large is that there's a lot of special cases in which you want to try stuff, but all of these tips are like there to really help you get successful quickly with these prints, especially if you're new to this. So all of this is super important, and eventually it becomes second nature. And then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what to do. This is good, etc. But yeah, no, great information. We are approaching the first hour mark and stuff, and I know you wanted to get into some supports and stuff, but already, yeah, we have a comment here. This is very educational, and do not cross my mind that this could be a problem. So seriously, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to be fast because, like I said, I have so
No,
many things I
you're
want
good.
to explain. Okay.
You're good.
Okay,
We'll
then
have to have you back. We'll have to have you back to do something in the future again. So like this is obviously a much bigger conversation, which I enjoy, So and everybody's been asking for a long time. So we'll have to do more. But yeah, please continue.
I'm fine with that. I can talk all day long about 3D printing and ZBrush, no problem. Anyway, now I'm just these two models, which are very similar, and then I want to move forward. I want to prepare these models. I can just start with one. Let me just hide the other. I did my orientation, and we do also most of the time, we are with the Move tool, we have this lift up. We are lifting the model slightly to avoid touching the build plate. Why? Because when you are printing the first layer, to be sure it will really stick on the build plate, we are over-curing. We are doing some kind of overexposure of the resin. It really stick very hard, let's say, on the build plate, and then the support are growing. We avoid starting from the build plate because this exposure, is making the resin inflating. You are losing details, and then when you want to remove your print from the build plate, you need to use a spatula. You can scratch your model. You can just break your model. That's why having the support just on down the model. If you do something wrong on the support, it's not a big deal because this is something that you will trash anyway. Then I lift my model and I go then in this prepare section. And then we will talk about these supports and first about this hollowing that we mentioned before. This model that I see on screen is just a big block of resin if you print like this. You can estimate the resin volume. You have the estimate resin volume here, a small computation. And right now, this is 21 from, let's say, 22 milliliter of resin. Then it's not that much, considering that you have bottles of 1 liter, which is 1,000 milliliters. But since this model is quite big, if you can save a little bit of resin, it will be better. And there is another reason, is when you are hollowing your model, it's not only to save resin, it's to reduce this cross-section of your layer that you need to peel from your resin tank. Then there is two benefits. That's why you can use, in Lychee Slicer, we have the hollowing functionality. We have the 2D hollowing. Then you can activate, you can define the thickness, a small thickness. And what you see in black color is the hollowing of the 3D model. Inside also you have a kind of infill, which are small support to give some strength and keeping, let's say, the model really in shape, I would say, avoiding deformations. Or you can use something which I prefer, and ZBrush users are more used to that, is using a 3D hollowing. Then you can define also the thickness and the quality, and you can update your model. And after a few seconds, you have your model which has been hollowed really on the geometry part of the model, while the 2D hollowing, it's only when it's exporting. And something that I was doing years ago when I was working at Pixologic, I really pushed to have this hollowing functionality with DynaMesh, and also working with live booleans to do the hollowing, because at that time it was not really possible to do the hollowing in slicing software. Then it's great to do that in ZBrush, but doing that in a slicer is better, because the slicer is aware of what is the hollowing and not what is the hollowing. As an example, you have this exterior functionality, which shows you exactly what is the hollowing. Then you see the inside of the model. And if you want to do some preparation, adding supports, you can do that without any problem using this functionality. If you are using let's say the DynaMesh, and you are doing your holes, your vent holes in ZBrush, then it's just one shape, and the slicer is not aware of what is inside or outside. And there is multiple functionality which are using this inside outside, and that's why this is the best. And also at any time you can change the quality, the thickness of your model, then you have a lot of freedom. And then to answer the question from Shane Olson about small cavities and all of that, if you are just using this clipping bar, then you see the model, you see the hollowing like that, and you may see like there some small cavities which appears.
Yeah,
like
I gave you some problems.
Yeah, exactly, but which is good. You see some of there, you see. Then if you leave as is, the problem is that you will have resin, liquid resin, which will be trapped in your model. Then when it's very, very small parts, and you see that my thickness here is 1.8 millimeter, then this is very small. Then these are very, very small cavities. I would say it's not a big deal. You can skip them. But if you have bigger cavities, it can be very troublesome, because over the time, your resin will, depending on the temperature in your room, the quality of your resin and all of that, may, let's say, inflate, move, and what it can do, it can break your print. And then if it breaks your print, you have some resin liquid which will just flow outside of your 3D model. And if you have big prints, it can be really troublesome. On top of that, liquid resin in opposition to pure resin is more toxic. Then it's very important to avoid that. And in Lychee Slicer, we have a tool in the hollowing section, which is the suction cup detector. And I will speak about that a little bit later, which shows you all the cavity that you have in the software, in the 3D model. Meaning that if you print your model like that, everything you see in yellow will be liquid resin inside of this solid resin. And this is the reason why you need to add some holes, vent holes, like this one. I put a small one here. I can change the size like this. If you are using the clipping bar, you see my hole in black here, appear there. And then if I have a hole and update my suction cup, you see that now it detects only small cavities there, there, there. And all these cavities, of course, this one is because of the key. Let me just add a small hole there, like this one. Let me just search again. And now I have less cavities. And this is why it's very important to use this type of tool, because you see that, okay, I have a small cavity on the hollowing of the key here, a small one there. All of them are, let's say, not a big deal. They are very small one. You can skip them. And why, Thomas, you speak so much about these cavities, and why the name is suction cup detector? Because a lot of people, probably you watching this stream right now, are using the hollowing functionality mainly to save, like I said, the resin. Then, okay, great, let me save my resin. Let me just use perhaps more the lower body final model. It perhaps will be easier on this one. Then you want to save resin. You see, on a big model like this one, it's big model with a big part. Then if you use the hollowing, same process, 3D hollowing, sorry. Let's say like that, you can really save a lot of resin. But if you don't put holes on your model or not in the good location, let's say I put a hole, it will be more better to, let's say, have a hole on this location there, like this one, and I'm running the suction cup detector. You see, okay, you have a hole, then the resin can flow outside of your 3D model during the 3D process and all of that. But the bottom part here, and sorry, I have a small bug probably here, all of that is a big suction cup. And you know probably what is a suction cup when you have, let's say, your bath tube, which is, let's say, blocked. Sorry, I don't know the name in English.
Yeah.
You use a suction cup tool and you try to unclog, sorry, your bath tube, and you see that you have a lot of strength like that. Or something different, you have some water, you put a glass of water upside down, you put inside the water, you see that the water won't go inside of the glass. Or if you put some water under the water in your glass, you move on top, the water will stay inside of the glass until you go outside of the water. Then this is all the suction cup. And people don't understand how much forces are implied in a suction cup. And resin printing, for each layer, remember this band-aid that you need to remove, this is already a big chunk of forces applied to your print. But if you add some suction cup like that, it will be very problematic. It adds even more forces. And that's why when you are using the hollowing, it's key, very crucial, that you add holes as close as possible to the beginning of the hollowing. Then I put a hole here. I do the update. Okay, same for this one.
Yep. And why you do that too. This is why we covered in episode 2 about going through and fixing a lot of this stuff. And as you can see here, I'm still in the process of fixing this model coming up because there's still a lot of internal geometry that I can remove on the ZBrush side and make it a lot better and avoid a lot of these problems. So somebody had asked in the chat, would this file be available for them to print it? And I'm actually planning on releasing this file as soon as it's finished. I might need another week or two, but definitely keep an eye out for that because we'll share it once it's completed and you guys can play with it as well. But as you can see, yeah, there's a lot of materials that still I need to go in and make sure that it's removed in order to make this a lot easier of a process. But the fact that you have so many tools in Lychee Slicer to check this stuff is super cool because now you can send it over, you can check it, and then if you need to, you can decide, as the artist, oh, do I come back in to ZBrush and go fix it, or do I try solutions that are here? And this is really a good solid way to figure out your best approach.
Yeah, exactly. Because for this type of model, it would be better to have the tortue. I don't know the name in English. Sorry, the back of
shell.
Yeah, the shell. Yeah, thank you. It's better to have the shell, and you see all these parts here, which are, of course, we see that are visible because the shell has been added on the top. Better to find a way to close, all this part there to be really just having a kind of cap, I would say, there. Like that, you avoid all of that, and you have a big shell outside without having internal parts. Because having a model like that, it can be, let's say, visually confusing. You see, you have a lot of this suction cup everywhere. You need to understand where you put all of that. You have the pockets on the side. And something we discussed before doing this, starting the live stream, the more you understand the 3D printing, the better you will prepare your model in ZBrush, your design. And sometimes small changes in your design can reduce a lot the process of preparing your 3D model. Like I said, this pocket, if you just tilting slightly the pocket more to be on the side and then arriving, let's say, more closer to the body there, and be sure it starts from the body and not just in the empty space, it can improve a lot. Also, all these small gaps you see around the belt and the body, if it's directly in contact of the model, and then you merge everything with DynaMesh, then it's a unique shell, and you avoid to put extra support or leaving small gaps that you can have between multiple parts of your model. Then all these small details, it's easy to do in ZBrush if you anticipate all of that. But if you don't, when you are in your slicing software like Lychee Slicer, it can be a lot of extra work just to add more support or dealing with this hollowing. You see, the pocket is big enough to have its own hollowing. You see, like that. But the pocket, just look into details. You can use the up arrow key in Lychee Slicer, and you see this pocket start to be connected there with the 3D model. And then with the body, but you have this big gap. While if everything could have been connected all together around like that, and perhaps starting more on the bottom, it would be just the same cavity for the body itself, and then the pocket and other accessories. While here I need to add a suction cup, a hole, which need to go through the model to be sure that I'm able to avoid this suction cup there, and be sure I will be able to clean my model with the liquid resin when I will be done with my 3D print. That's why the preparation is really key, because it can save you a lot of time and avoiding just forgetting about a pocket that you hollowed. And then this pocket is not small. I don't know what is the volume, but forgetting to add a hole on this type of model, if you forget liquid resin, for sure over the time it may break because of the difference of liquid resin versus cured resin. Sorry, talking a lot as usual.
No, I talk all day too. No, this is perfect. And again, it's these are so important tips and things to remember. It's, again, we've mentioned it several times, and especially when talking about putting these live streams up, the importance of going back and forth, checking and making sure that all this stuff is, and these are now the reasons why it's all coming together to showcase the failures as well as the successes. These are the reasons why we want to come through and do this. So thank you. So far, everybody here seems to be pretty good. We did have a question a little while back, and I want to make sure that I find it and ask.
I saw one about 2D versus 3D for the hollowing. It's just a matter of preference. 2D hollowing is only on the free version. Is on the free version, while 2D and 3D are in the pro version. For the base, as an example, which is a big model, I'm using the 2D hollowing because this is easy. It's just one click. You have all the infill inside. You just need to add few holes, and it's done. It's just a matter of preference. But on my end, I prefer using, for most of the time, the 3D hollowing, because when you are inside of your model and you want to add some support, you have a good visibility and you can control what you want to do. This is always the difference between, let's say, you want to spend some time on your 3D model to have a good preparation and having the control. Why? Because you do your design, you spend a lot of time in ZBrush to create all your models, doing variations and all of that. Then perhaps you want to spend a lot of energy, I would say, to be sure your print will be perfect. And then you may want to have the full control. Otherwise, you can do the automatic functionality. I did not really show you that. Let me just go back to, sorry, I'm just jumping back to something different. Let me just go back to the head itself. And we have a functionality which we call a magic, which lets you, let's say, in an automatic way, doing most of the stuff. Then it will do the auto orientation, adding the auto support. Let me just include support, optimize the support, adding the raft to be sure it will stick on the model, and so on. Then you click on this button, it's doing the auto orientation. But even that, you may have noticed the auto orientation is not optimized. Unfortunately, Lychee Slicer doesn't have eyes like us. That's why I prefer on my end just removing the auto orientation. You click on this button and it will add all the support for you. Let's say ready to be 3D printed. It will find where you need to have highlands to be sure it will keep the model in place, to consider all the strengths apply, sorry, the forces apply to the 3D model during the printing process. Then it does the job for you. And then this 3D model doesn't have hollowing. And for me, I'm a beginner. Let me just add this 2D hollowing. Let me just put that on. You need to add manually the hole. Unfortunately, it's not automatic. But you add, let's say, one hole here, one hole here. And now you are good to go. You can print your model, you can export, and you can print. This is the, I would say, the fast and easy way. But the automatic support, while it's doing a great job, like I said, it doesn't know if it's a face, the eyes, where are the key details on your model. That's why the manual supports, manual hollowing, all of that. The steps, of course, are higher to learn all of that. The learning curve, of course, takes more time. It's a bit more difficult. But as soon as you start to master that, it's way better. And something, just a little story. Of course, we have new team members joining the company at Lychee Slicer, and most of them start with automatic support and this magic functionality. But after a few prints, they really start to switch to manual support and they never come back. Then you need to learn a little bit, but it's way more powerful. Yep. I hope I answered the question about the hollowing 2D and 3D.
Yep. No, absolutely. That was great. I want to ask a question just for the audience. When you're adding your holes, is there a recommended size that you would suggest for adding these holes? Is there something that's too big or too small?
You need to avoid a too small hole. This one, if I'm looking at Lychee Slicer, it's roughly 3.8 millimeter, which is, in my opinion, the minimum size for a hole. It's better to go around 5 millimeter and more. After, it will depend. You can have a lot of small holes all together, or you can have a big hole. If you are limited, let's say, by the available space on your 3D model, you can stick like with a small size, but perhaps adding small extra holes, I would say here, let's say, and there. Why? Because your resin, which is more or less fluid, sometimes the viscosity can be quite high. Each time your model going up and down in the resin, then the resin really move a lot inside of your model, outside of course, but also inside. And if your hole is too small, then the build plate going down, you have so many forces that the hole is not big enough to have all the resin going through this hole. Then a bigger hole is better, or multiple small holes which are close together to be sure that the forces applied to the resin and then on your and of course applied on your model are not big enough. Then when I see some people having very, very small hole, like 1 millimeter, just in a small location to be sure it won't be visible for the model, and people say, oh, my print failed because it just break on this area or failed for the model because it's too small, and then it's like there is no hole.
Yep. Oh, fantastic. Cool. So we have a few more minutes. I'd say we have about 15 more minutes ish.
Okay.
So you brought up manual supports.
Exactly. Then when you I may not be able to support everything. You see just a few seconds ago that you can do automatic. Manual is a lot better. Then what is important is to define exactly where you have islands. Islands are this part of the model that you can see here, or let me see here. You have also there multiple location. When you are moving this clipping bar up, let me just show that. I'm using the up arrow key, or if you want to go 5 by 5 layers, you can use the shift key in addition to the up arrow key. And you see that you have these layers, this part of, pixel, which appears. This is what we call islands. And it can appear on multiple locations. And at some point, it will connect to, of course, other part of the model. That's why you always need to have at least one support. I said at least one support to help your model. I'm using the word growing. For me, it's like a flower which is growing, or a tree, or whatsoever, like that. And that's why this line which appear when you are moving your cursor is showing you what will be the layer. Then this is a preview. You see there on this bottom part, you can see there, and you need to add this support to help, of course, this part growing. Obviously, you need to start from the bottom. Then you have, oops, sorry, I didn't lift this model. You see, I forgot just to lift there. Let me go back in there, lifting up. Okay. Then what I'm always doing is trying to find the main islands to add a minimum of support. You see, this is really the beginning. You see, like that. Probably having something which go there, like this. Then you can look by yourself at all these islands, then the beginning of this print, or you can use what we have. We have a tool which is the island detector. Let me search in, let's say, detailed quality. It may take some time because it will look at almost all the layers. I hope I will not shut down my voice while I'm talking about that. It will look at all the layers and all the areas, and will show you, okay, this is all the islands where you need to add support. Then this operation takes some time. Of course, the bigger is your model, the more polygon you have, the bigger is your printer, the longer it will be. Sometimes this is the time to take a coffee, to do a quick break. But it's really important, because if you forgot to support some part of your model and you start your print, then nothing will keep your print in position, and a part may just fail, and it's not good for your print. Then using this island detector is great. And while it's computing, if you have some question, feel free.
I do, actually. Yeah, there is we did have a question that was like, which free software do you suggest? I mentioned in the chat, there is a free version that you can start with Lychee today, so definitely check it out. We have another question, which you kind of touched on a little bit, but maybe a little bit more in depth, which is, I've been using Lychee for a little over 2 years. Do you know why sometimes when I print a hollow part like a base, sometimes it prints in full? Does it even hollow?
That's a very good question. It should be full, it should be hollowed. The problem is, for something like that, the best is to just contact our support, because it's like in ZBrush, probably. We have a lot of people asking questions, which sometimes are not bugs. Of course, it can be user error. We all do user error, but sometimes this is something which are not really understood by the user, or because the hole has been put on the model. This is probably what happened. But the hole, you need to define, let's say, the depth of your hole, let's say the size. It also happened to me. At some time, I don't put the hole in, let's say, the good depth, and then it doesn't go through the thickness of my model. But if your hole is going through the thickness of your model, and you don't have the hollowing, this is a full block of resin, I have no idea. Then the best thing to do is to contact the support, and very important, sending your file. Like that, we can look at the problem and see if it's a bug on Lychee Slicer, which can happen, obviously, or if it's something which is missing in the preparation.
Awesome.
Okay, then now the islands have been computed, and you see that you can now, in red, see all these islands on the model. And you will see that some islands are keys, while some other are not. You see this one, it really helps your model to start growing, which is quite important. And this one, there, you see, it starts, but very quickly, it connects to the rest of, on the part of the model. That's why using this clipping bar is really, really important. You really need to learn how to use this type of bar. And let me just going up. You see like that, you see the model which is growing. And you see this, let's say these islands that I was looking just before. And it's alone, 1 layer, 2 layer, 3, 4. And after the 5th layer, it connects to everything else. Right now, I'm printing in 50 microns. Then 5 layers of 50 microns. This is 250 microns. This is a quarter of millimeter. And if you want to add a support to help this part just growing, you have the tip of my support, which is right now medium size, 0.6 millimeter. Then you have quite a big support for a small part. And if you say, okay, but if I don't support the island, my print will fail. Okay, this small part may just remain on the resin tank, just on the film at the bottom. But after this 5 layer, it will connect to everything else, and then it will unstick progressively. Then after perhaps 6 layers, it will stick to your model. That's why it's important also to use this functionality I really love, which is a layer thickness preview, which shows you the preview of each layers. And then you can see like that, each layer, one by one before connecting. And this is a way to help you to understand better the structure of what will be printed on your 3D model. Then me, as a user, I will not add a support there because for me, this is useless. There is not much need for that. But adding support to help my model really growing, because this is a big part, especially for the back there, for the shell, it's important for me to add all of these supports and be sure it will grow, like I said before, in a good way. You see it going well. And after some point, you see it's connected to this part there. And now you need to understand that you have multiple types of support, which is not very to explain, I have to say, for me, at least in English. You have supports like this one or these ones, which are support to help the islands, like I said, growing. Then you have support for overhangs, like for my jaws there, the angle there. This is a very slow angle, and like you see here, you see each layer one by one is really moving forward very far. Then you need to add these supports just to avoid deformations during the peeling process. And then the last support, sorry, my mouse is going too fast. Last support that I'm adding sometime in position where I can remove them. They are not mandatory, but by adding this support, it will keep your model, let's say, in position. Something that you need really to understand is each layers are, let's say, 50 microns. Sometimes people go up to 30 or 20 microns. This is very, very small. And you have this peeling process where the build plate is going up and down for each layers. And if your model during this peeling process is moving slightly, let's say 10, 20 microns, it's not that much, but enough sometimes to see a kind of line, a layer line, because the model between the previous and next layer just shifted slightly because of the hollowing, suction cup, or some reason because you touch the printer, or sometimes even the model doesn't really shift too much, but sometimes 2 or 3 microns each layers. Then after 10 layers, it shifts, let's say, from 20 to 30 microns. And this is where you start to see some deformations. Then adding some support for stabilization is great because it can avoid some deformation and ensure that you have a successful print. Then you see a lot of things that you need to understand about the layer structure. That's why these automatic supports are doing the job about, okay, I need to have support here for stabilization, for overhangs, and of course for the islands. When you do that manually, you need to understand the way it's working to understand all this trend. But like I said, this is a lot of information for you to process right now. I understand that this is a lot of information.
Yep.
And Jan, why I'm adding some extra support? Please let me know.
No, absolutely. Does anybody have any other questions as well? Also, Bruno said, thank you so much for your in-depth answer. That's fantastic. And again, this is something too, while we have a couple minutes left, this is something that we really just wanted to showcase. We wanted to showcase examples of what could go wrong. We want to showcase examples of what you should do right. These are all really important because, again, this stuff takes time. This is why I say that a lot of times if you're sculpting and then you're moving to 3D printing, you're definitely wearing multiple hats. And this is where your engineering or designer hat comes into play, because you have to go through and this, take everything into consideration, what we've been mentioning, and just showcase, how do I fix this part? How do I come in and make that work? The more time you spend on this, just like anything, the more, I call it time behind the wheel. The more time you spend going through these steps and trying it, the more you'll ultimately start avoiding. But sometimes these things will come up and you're like, oh, I forgot to go do that. So let me go do that. We did have a question pop in, which is awesome. How do I know whether to use light, medium, or heavy supports? And is there a specific situation in which you recommend the scaffolding-like supports?
I'm sorry about the scaffolding-like supports. My vocabulary is limiting. I know the word, but I heard the word, but I'm not very sure about the second part. Then I will at least answer the first part of the question. That's a very good question because you have in Lychee Slicer or other slicer a light, medium, and heavy preset, and you can create, of course, your own supports. I'm reading the vanilla version of Lychee Slicer right now that I don't have my own custom setting, but you see what really changed are the tip diameter. The tip diameter is the part which connect to the 3D model. It's like you have a small sphere on top, and the diameter of this sphere, which is just really on the cross section between the support and the shell here, is this parameter. Then 30, let's say this one is 60. If I switch to 30, you see the change of parameters, or then you can go to heavy, which are very strong. Then you need to consider multiple things. First is how big your model is and what is the density of your support. If you have a very big model, then a lot of white on your model, especially during the print, then you need to have a lot of support and at least few strong support to be sure it stay in position and your support will not break. Then you have, and most of the time I put this heavy support, strong supports in location where it's easy to cut and there is no problem about sanding. Like I said, just hiding them in part like this one, this is a cut. Then if I need to sand this big support, it's not a problem. But at least I know for my two legs, I will have strong support which keep my model in position. Then medium supports are more, let's say, my way to go support that I put like that everywhere. I'm not using 0.6 is quite big now for me, but this is what I will use. And when I have very small, tiny details, which are like this one, very close to connect to everything else, then I use this light support because they will be used only for few layers to connect to something else, or because I want to have as less as possible scars on my 3D print after removing my support. But the denser are your supports, the smaller can be your tips of your support. But if you are then, meaning that if you're using light supports to work on smaller areas, you may need to increase the density to be sure that the contact points, the force on these contact points are strong enough. Because if you want to support a big model only with light supports because they are very small and you want to have all of these scars, the risk is during the first peeling the first peeling of your model, they will not be strong enough, they will break. And after that, all the other supports, the one after the other, will break. And this is again an example of where you have a print where your supports are printing, but not your model, because the first support just break, and after that, everything else break. Then this is a good balance to find. And also, sorry, this is very technical now. It depends also of the type of film you have at the bottom of your tank. You have multiple films, what we call FEP, F-E-P, FEP and FEP for non-FEP. And now you have ACF, which are film which have less how can I say that? The pinning force are really weak. Then you have less strength applied to your print during the pinning process. Then you can go down. As an example, I did a print yesterday with my medium support have been 0.35 millimeters, which is almost the half of what I have right now. Then it really depends of your printer, the speed, the size. But a rule of thumb, it's better to have more supports and support which are, let's say, with a tip diameter which is bigger when you are a beginner, than trying to save some resin or avoid post-process work, because you may have a failed print. And for me, the frustration is worse than spending more time than cutting your supports and having more, let's say, scars on your 3D model. Just keep that in mind. 3D printing is really fantastic, but it can be very frustrating because about everything, like I'm trying to explain, and it's very, very difficult to explain everything right now in so short amount of time. But well, that's why add more supports, be thicker with your supports, and if it's working fine, then reduce progressively the size of your support, eventually the density. If you have a failed print, try to understand why you have a failed print. And just to finish, sorry about the support very quickly, I added what we call bracing. This is a new system we have in Lychee Slicer, which just connect all the supports together with some bracing, with these diagonal supports, which will give some strength, because if you have very tall supports which are not connected to each other, during the pinning process and this lifting up and down, your support will move, and they will be useless. And this is one of the improvements we did in Lychee Slicer. Now you can print very big model and having very, very strong supports. Sorry.
No, absolutely. and talking about the bracing, that's what they meant by the scaffolding, which is which was great. Okay. And again, that's about, you're talking about swaying, and the taller it gets, you're going to have movement. You want to avoid that as much as possible. That's a really cool feature. I use it. I also, going back to what you're saying about don't worry, adding more supports than fewer, the frustration of failing. My friends had teased me that I'm an over supporter, that I use too many supports, but most of my prints, I would say 95% of the time, my prints are successful, and I'm happy with it, and I move on, and I spend a couple extra bucks, but for me, it's peace of mind. But everyone's different. I know some guys who are like super insane, and they're perfect, and their prints come out all the time, but they have the most minimal supports, and I'm like, you're crazy.
So I prefer the success, meaning that, like I said, I prefer to have better. Of course, it's a lot of things to learn, to experiment, and all of that. But the joy of having your own design in your hands in the real world, for me, this is priceless. Then spend the time. We shared in the chat a link for a live stream I did on Lychee Slicer to prepare a 3D model. I really go into detail. This is 2 hours long or something like that. It's the live stream. Then if you really want to learn more about the support, I really go into really in depth about multiple things about preparing your 3D model. Then it's a kind of a longer version of what I explained today. Of course, there is not this new supports that we call grid supports, but at least it should help you to understand better all of that. By the way, of course, we have our own Discord server. There is not only the ZBrush one. We have our own Discord server. Then feel free to ask your question dedicated to Lychee Slicer there. The whole team is on Discord server. I'm there myself. Then I'm Thomas from the Lychee team. Then feel free to ping me, tag me. I'll be very happy also to help you to answer your questions. And I started a few months ago a YouTube channel in English about Lychee Slicer, and I hope to do more and more videos about Lychee Slicer, and I hope also to do videos about ZBrush and Lychee Slicer, because both of them are really working together, and I really love both of them.
Oh, absolutely. You and me both. Just we don't really have any more time for more questions, but the last one I wanted to ask you was if we can just show, let's assume we're done with this, you've supported everything, you're happy to go. How do they export this
Oh,
in
yeah.
order to get it in?
Yeah. Very quickly, you have a simulator to help you in the export section to understand the process of 3D printing. It can really help you. We also have a banana for scale to help you to understand the scale of your model, because sometimes going from ZBrush or Lychee Slicer to the real world, you notice that the scale is not the good one. Then it helps you to understand everything else. You also have a function icon, show that now, which is physical size mode, which would be great to have that in ZBrush. You just pick your ruler, you just do the measurement of this line there, you enter the value, and then your camera will be at the exact size of your 3D model, meaning that if I print my model, the model from you, Jan, right now, and I put in front of my screen, it will be this exact size. Then this export section is not only exporting, but also helping you to anticipate what your print will look like in terms of size and so on. And then to answer your question, of course, you are in the export section. You just need to decide which, of course, printer you want to use. You have a lot of printers, few of them. We have really a lot of printers and brands. Probably all the printers that you're looking for are in Lychee Slicer. You also have the resin parameters. This is quite complex, but we have what we call community resin profile, and the community is pushing the parameters for the print, that you have successful rate and all of that, the number of users. Then you can use these parameters, which can be quite frightening the first time you open that. And then you choose if you want to use the anti-aliasing or not, and then exporting your files. If your printer is connected to Wi-Fi or Ethernet, you can also export if they are supported directly to your printer, and then you start your print right away. Then this is really a basic operation. My only comment would be about the anti-aliasing. Now some printers have very small pixels. Now we have 12K and 14K, while our best TV are only 8K. Then very small pixels. Then for these printers, it's so small that there is no need to use the anti-aliasing. Then it will be a faster rendering, and in fact, it will be sharper details for your 3D print.
Yeah,
and that's all.
yeah, that's a great call out. Yeah, I don't think I've used anti-aliasing for a couple of years now, because printers are just getting more and more insane every year. I feel like if you leave 3D printing for 2 years, you just stop and then come back, technology is mind blowing. And it's mind blowing even in short terms. Like I spent a lot of time doing just resin printing, went back to filament printing, and oh my gosh, the technology, everything has a auto bed level, everything has just like presets to just fix a lot of problems ahead of time. It's moving progressively fast, but it's also so much fun too, like you were saying, to see your print come to life. Because for me, this was the thing that got me into ZBrush, coming from manufacturing aerospace parts into sculptures and statues. It actually really connected me with the software a lot easier than it did seeing it on my screen and being like, oh, that's a cool model, that's awesome, I don't know what to do. So it's fantastic to see all this come to life, and printing is the way to go about it. So
okay.
All right. Well, we are gonna, unfortunately, we have to wrap it up. Tomorrow I could
I
probably
know.
talk
That's
all
why
day about this.
I'm
But
shutting my mouth.
again, yep, you were good. But again, everyone, thank you guys so much for coming into this stream. We've already seen that this is highly demanded and that you guys like to see shows like this. So we want to do more in the future as well. So keep an eye out for that. We're going to just quickly, real fast, add to the stage. You know, if shows like this, the events that and so forth that come in here, it's over on the Maxon channel. So you can go ahead, or maxon.net. You can see all the events that are happening. We do have a live stream coming up this Wednesday. So I will not be streaming this Wednesday because we have some special guests coming in from Pitch Dev Studios and how they've used 2024 ZBrush in their new production, which is fantastic to see. And we also have an Ask the Trainer coming up. And then if you do have any questions, thoughts, things, and all that good stuff, you can ask those questions, which, whoops, I lost the link to that. That's my fault. 1 second. Actually, Kyle, can you put the link into that chat for me, please, in the background? And shout out to Kyle. Kyle does amazing work behind the scenes to ensure that all the links and stuff get posted. So everyone secretly or out loud say thanks to Kyle. But again, outside of that, we also have a Getting Started series, which comes in, and we have a lot of different tutorials, a lot of different series about how to get into our software. And these tutorials are completely free. Just come in, create an account, which is free. You don't even have to have a license. Just come and create an account to Maxon, check out what this stuff does, get an idea of how our software works and what we can be using there. And then, of course, too, we have the free t-shirt. Thank you for hanging out with us today. If you were here during this live stream, then you can go ahead and grab your shirt. The only thing is you got to pay for shipping. That's the only aspect, couple bucks US. But you can see here we got a lot of shirts and stuff. So grab yourself a ZBrush shirt and all that good jazz. And then, of course, too, if you missed this stream, you're watching it VOD. Well, if you're watching it, awesome. If you didn't know that they were, then you go to the Maxon training team, and you can see here that you can go back and actually see not only when we're live, but also the live streams that we've done, including the Come See How It's Made with me, which I usually do most Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So that being said, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for coming onto the show. It's super important. We couldn't do it without you guys. So it really is amazing. We put these shows up here to help connect your knowledge with the software and the pipelines as much as possible. So thank you, the audience, for being here. And thank you, Tama, for coming on, especially such a last minute thing. We were able to get you on here. I know you're super busy and you're developing a really cool tool. And it's fun to be able to know that I can take my ZBrush models and I can move them into Lychee Slicer and get them printed relatively quickly. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation, for the time that together. I've been very pleased to discuss about ZBrush and 3D printing and Lychee Slicer. Okay, then let's do another one next time, perhaps more focus on the specific subject, probably, because it's so many things to cover. Let's talk about 3D printing and ZBrush, but which is great because this is creative stuff, and I really love that.
Same, me too.
Thanks.
All right. Well, then, everybody, we'll catch you next time. Have a good one. Enjoy a tasty week. Talk to you later.
Bye.